Hey, everyone. I don't even know where to start with this, but I guess I just need to get it out. Maybe some of you have been through something similar, and if you have, I'd appreciate any advice or even just knowing I'm not alone in this. My name's Ethan. I'm 38, been married to my wife Claire for 12 years. We have two amazing kids, Emma 10 and Lucas 7. I always thought we had a solid marriage. We weren't perfect, who is? But we made it work. I worked my butt off to provide for my family, sometimes taking extra shifts, sometimes putting in long hours, but it was all for them. I wanted Claire to have the life she deserved, and I wanted my kids to have every opportunity possible. Claire used to be different. When we first got together, she was loving, thoughtful, the kind of woman who'd leave little notes in my lunchbox or text me just to say she missed me. But somewhere along the way, things changed. She got a promotion at work about 3 years ago. At first, I was proud of her. She had always been ambitious, and she worked hard for it. But as her career took off, I felt like our marriage started slipping away. She started coming home later, saying she had business dinners or networking events. She used to text me during the day, asking how my day was going. Now, sometimes I wouldn't hear from her at all until she walked through the door. At first, I told myself she was just busy. Work was demanding, and she was adjusting to her new role. But then, little things started adding up. She started dressing differently, more stylish, more expensive. She always looked great, don't get me wrong, but now it was like she was putting on a show for someone else. She was glued to her phone, guarding it like it held the secrets to the universe. And intimacy? Almost non-existent. I'd ask if everything was okay, and she'd brush me off. I'm just tired, Ethan. Work is stressful. Or, you wouldn't understand, you're not in this world. That one stung. Since when did we live in different worlds? Still, I didn't push. I trusted her. I loved her. I told myself this was just a phase. But deep down, something wasn't sitting right. Then came the business trips. She had never traveled much for work before, but now she was suddenly flying out every few months. Always a different city, always a big conference or strategy meeting. And when she came back, she was distant. Not just tired, not just stressed, like she didn't even want to be home. Like she was somewhere else in her mind. I tried to bring it up gently one night. She was sitting at the kitchen table, sipping a glass of wine, scrolling on her phone. "Hey," I said, leaning against the counter. "I feel like we haven't really talked in a while. Are you happy? Like, with us?" She barely looked up. "Ethan, don't be dramatic." "I'm not being dramatic. Something feels off." She sighed, setting her phone down. "I've just been busy. You act like I'm doing something wrong just because I have a life outside of this house." That hit me like a punch to the gut. A life outside this house. Like our family was a cage. I dropped it after that. But I knew. I knew something was happening. I just didn't have proof yet. And that's when I decided to find out. After that conversation, I couldn't shake the feeling that Claire was hiding something. I wasn't the paranoid type. I never snooped through her phone, never questioned her every move. But something about the way she brushed me off, like I was some burden, like I was keeping her from something better, it just didn't sit right. I decided to pay more attention. Nothing crazy, just noticing things. First, the way she guarded her phone. She used to leave it on the counter, on the couch, wherever. Now it was always on silent, always face down. If I walked into the room while she was texting, she'd tilt the screen away or lock it immediately. Then, the work trips. They were always last minute. She'd tell me on a Tuesday that she was flying out Thursday for a weekend conference. And the strangest part? She never seemed that stressed about them. No scrambling to prepare, no late-night calls or emails. Just smooth, easy trips that she didn't talk much about when she got back. One night, about a week after our conversation in the kitchen, I decided to test something. She was in the bathroom, getting ready for bed. Her phone was on the nightstand, and for the first time in a long time, she left it unlocked. I wasn't proud of what I did next. But I had to know. I picked it up and went straight to her messages. Nothing suspicious in her texts. Work group chats, messages from her mom, a couple from friends. Then I opened her email. There it was. A confirmation for a hotel reservation in Chicago. Not for a conference. Not for a meeting. Just a two-person stay at a luxury hotel. My heart was pounding, but I kept scrolling. Then I saw an email from Nathan Langley, her boss. It wasn't explicit, nothing like "I can't wait to be with you," but it didn't have to be. "Looking forward to this weekend. You always make things exciting." Exciting. Right. I heard the bathroom door open, and I barely had time to put the phone back before Claire walked into the bedroom. She smiled at me, actually smiled, and climbed into bed like nothing was wrong. I just stared at the ceiling, my mind racing. I had my answer. But I wasn't going to confront her. Not yet. No, I was going to make sure she paid for this. That night, I barely slept. Claire, on the other hand, dozed off like she didn't have a care in the world. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, my mind running in 1,000 directions. I had proof. Not enough for a full confrontation, but enough to know she was cheating. And with Nathan, of all people. Her boss. A guy I'd met a few times at company events. Charismatic, sure. But something about him had always rubbed me the wrong way. Too smooth. Too charming. The kind of guy who loved being the center of attention. The kind of guy who took what he wanted without caring who got hurt in the process. I wanted to wake Claire up right then, throw the phone in her face, and demand answers. But I knew that wouldn't get me what I wanted. See, I wasn't just thinking about revenge, I was thinking about my kids. If I blew up now, she'd do damage control. She'd start painting me as the jealous, insecure husband, maybe even try to twist things so I looked like the bad guy. And if this led to divorce, which it clearly would, I needed to be smart. I needed to make sure I didn't just walk away. I needed to make sure she was the one who lost everything. So I kept my mouth shut. The next morning, Claire acted completely normal. Kissed me on the cheek before heading to work, like she wasn't sneaking around behind my back. I watched her walk out the door, then pulled out my laptop. It was time to prepare. Step 1. Protect my finances. I started gathering everything: bank statements, investment accounts, property documents. I knew divorce was coming, and I wasn't about to let Claire take half of what I had worked for. I made sure to move some funds into a private account under my name. Nothing shady, nothing illegal, just ensuring that if she tried to drain our accounts, I'd have something to fall back on. Step 2. Build my case. I wasn't about to let Claire take my kids. Emma and Lucas were my world, and I wasn't going to let them get caught in the middle of this. So I started keeping records. I backed up the emails from Nathan. I kept track of her business trips. I started noting when she came home late, acting distant. I even looked into hiring a private investigator. If I was going to win full custody, I needed proof that she was putting her affair above our family. Step 3. Finding support. This part was tricky. I couldn't just go telling everyone what I knew. I needed to be careful about who I trusted. That's when Olivia came into the picture. She was the mother of Emma's best friend, Sophia. We talked in passing before, school events, birthday parties, that kind of thing. She was a single mom, had been through a rough divorce herself. One afternoon, while picking up Emma from a playdate, Olivia noticed I seemed off. "You okay?" she asked. I wasn't planning to open up, but something about the way she looked at me, like she actually cared, made me break. "Not really," I admitted. "Things at home aren't great." She didn't push, just nodded. "If you ever need to talk, I get it." I didn't realize how much I needed to hear that. Claire was out with coworkers that night, so after putting the kids to bed, I texted Olivia. "You ever feel like the person you married turned into a stranger?" She responded immediately. "Every day before my divorce." "You want to talk?" That's how it started. Just conversations at first. Two people who understood what it felt like to be betrayed. I didn't know it yet, but Olivia was going to be the person who got me through this. And Claire? She had no idea that her perfect little double life was about to come crashing down. Claire had no idea I was onto her. That was the hardest part, pretending everything was normal when inside I was boiling. Every time she kissed me goodbye, every time she smiled at me across the dinner table, every time she texted me some half-hearted working late excuse, I wanted to throw the truth in her face. But I held back. I had to be smart. So I played my role, the loving, oblivious husband. I asked about her day, listened to her stories about work, even nodded along when she talked about how demanding her job was. Meanwhile, I was documenting everything. I had already saved the hotel confirmation and Nathan's email, but I needed more. So I started taking notes, dates, times, little inconsistencies in her stories. I didn't just want to accuse her. I wanted to bury her in proof. In the meantime, Olivia and I kept talking. It started as casual, venting about life, about parenting, about how unfair it was to give everything to someone only for them to throw it away. But it didn't stay casual for long. One evening, we were both at a school event for the kids. Claire was supposed to come, but shocker, she had a work dinner. Olivia and I ended up standing next to each other, watching Emma and Sophia play. She bumped my shoulder with hers and smirked. "You look less miserable lately." "That's good." I chuckled. "Yeah, well, I've got a good therapist." She raised an eyebrow. "Oh yeah? Who's that?" I just smiled. That night, after putting the kids to bed, I found myself texting her again. "You ever think about what's next? Like, after all this mess?" She responded almost immediately. "All the time. Just not sure if I believe in happy endings anymore." I stared at my screen for a long time before replying. "Maybe we make our own." I wasn't sure where things were going with Olivia, but I knew one thing: she actually cared about me. She listened. She saw me in a way Claire hadn't in years. But I wasn't about to rush into something. First, I had to finish what I started. Then, things took a turn I never expected. One evening, Emma and Lucas were at my parents' house for the weekend, and Claire was working late again. I decided to test something. I called her. She didn't pick up. I waited 5 minutes, then texted, "Hey, everything okay?" No response. An hour later, I tried again. This time, she answered, her voice rushed. "Hey, sorry, super busy. What's up?" I kept my tone light. "Just wanted to see if you were okay. Haven't heard from you." She sighed. "Ethan, I told you, work is insane right now. I don't have time for check-ins." Check-ins. Like I was some clingy idiot she had to babysit. That's when I knew exactly where she was. I grabbed my keys and drove. Claire wasn't at work. She wasn't at some meeting. She was at the hotel with Nathan. I was sure of it. I pulled into the parking lot of the fancy downtown hotel she had booked last time and waited. Sure enough, 20 minutes later, she walked out through the front doors, laughing at something, with Nathan right beside her. She looked happy. More than happy. She looked alive. And that hurt more than I expected. They didn't see me. I stayed in my car, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I could have confronted her right then. Walked up, made a scene, humiliated her in front of her lover. But no, that wasn't enough. Claire didn't deserve a dramatic fight. She deserved to lose everything the way she had thrown me away like I was nothing. So I let her walk away, still believing she had fooled me. She had no idea she had just sealed her own fate. That night, I didn't go home right away. I sat in my car outside that hotel, just processing. Seeing Claire with Nathan, laughing, while I was at home holding our life together, it was like something inside me finally snapped into place. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a phase. This was who she had become. She had made her choice. Now, I was going to make mine. I drove home and started making moves. First, I called a lawyer. I wasn't ready to file for divorce just yet. I needed more leverage, but I needed to know my options. My biggest concern was the kids. I wasn't about to let Claire's selfishness cost them their stability. The lawyer was blunt. You need proof. Clear evidence of the affair. If you want full custody, you have to show that she's prioritizing her relationship over her role as a mother. I already had her emails. I had the hotel confirmation. But I needed more. So I made another call, to a private investigator. I figured if Claire was careless enough to parade around town with Nathan, she was careless enough to get caught. And I was right. Over the next few weeks, I played the perfect husband. I kissed her goodbye every morning. I asked about her business trips with a smile. I made sure she never suspected a thing. Meanwhile, the PI followed her. And the results were damning. Photos of her and Nathan entering hotels together. Receipts from fancy restaurants. dinners I had paid for while I was home with the kids. A full timeline of her movements, proving she was lying about her whereabouts. With everything I had now, I knew one thing for sure: Claire was going to lose. But I wasn't done yet. Claire thought she was in control, thought she could live this double life forever. She had no idea that her own kids were about to be the ones to expose her. And it was going to happen in the worst way possible. I didn't have to wait long for Claire's perfect little world to come crashing down. And the best part? She did it to herself. It was a Saturday afternoon. Emma and Lucas had a sleepover at my parents' house the night before, so Claire and I had the house to ourselves. She had spent the evening working late again, and by now, I didn't even bother questioning it. I just told her good night and let her believe I was still clueless. That morning, she got dressed up, way more than usual for a casual Saturday. Full makeup, expensive perfume, one of those dresses she only seemed to wear on business trips. "I've got a meeting," she said, grabbing her bag. "Might take a while." I just smiled. "Of course. Take your time." She kissed me on the cheek and left. And I knew exactly where she was going. See, I already had her location. A few nights before, I had borrowed her phone under the excuse of helping Emma with a school project. While I had it, I enabled location sharing on our family tracking app. Claire, being so confident in her lies, never even checked. So the moment she left, I pulled up my phone and saw it. She was heading straight to Nathan's apartment. I let her go. I let her settle in, probably curling up in his bed like she didn't have a husband and kids waiting for her at home. And then, fate did something even better than I could have planned. Emma called me. "Hey Dad. We're coming home early. Grandma has a headache." Claire had no idea. I told her I'd be there soon, but I had a different plan. Instead of picking them up myself, I sent them an Uber. And then I waited. 20 minutes later, I saw Claire's location start moving. She was coming back. Right as our kids were walking through the front door. I didn't warn them. I didn't try to soften the blow. Claire had been lying to all of us, and now she was going to face the consequences. I heard the front door open. Emma and Lucas ran inside, excited to be home. I was sitting at the kitchen table, pretending to look at something on my phone. Then, just as they were taking off their shoes, the garage door opened. Claire walked in, her heels clicking against the floor. She was still adjusting her dress, her hair a little too messy for just a meeting. Then she saw them. Her face went pale. "Mom." Emma's voice was small. "Where were you?" Claire froze. For the first time since this whole thing started, she had no excuse ready. I was at work," she stammered. Lucas frowned. "But it's Saturday." Emma tilted her head, looking at Claire's dress. "Why are you so dressed up?" Claire was trapped. And the worst part? She knew it. She looked at me then, eyes wide, silently begging for help. But I just sat there, watching her dig her own grave. She tried to recover. I had a lunch meeting. With a client. Emma's eyes narrowed. "Then why are you wearing perfume?" I almost laughed. My daughter was smarter than Claire gave her credit for. Claire looked flustered. "Sweetie, it's just, sometimes I like to dress up. It's not a big deal." Emma wasn't buying it. "Then why do you smell like men's cologne?" And just like that, Claire's whole world shattered. She didn't answer. She just stood there, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. I decided to help her out. "Kids," I said calmly, "why don't you go put your bags in your rooms? Your mom and I need to talk." They hesitated, but eventually, they went upstairs. As soon as they were out of earshot, Claire turned to me, her face full of panic. "Ethan," she whispered. "You have to help me." "They can't." I cut her off. "Help you?" I laughed, shaking my head. "Claire, you did this. You're the one who lied to them. And now they know something's wrong." Her hands were shaking. "We can fix this. We just have to." I stood up, leaning in close. "No, you have to fix this. You chose this life, Claire. Now deal with it." She opened her mouth to argue, but before she could, Emma's voice called from upstairs. "I don't want to talk to her." Claire flinched like she'd been slapped. Lucas came down the stairs, holding his stuffed dinosaur. He looked up at Claire, then at me. "Can I stay with you, Dad?" Claire's whole body sagged. She knew in that moment she had lost them. And I wasn't going to let her recover from it. Claire just stood there, looking like a ghost of herself. Her confident, smug attitude was gone. She knew the kids had sensed something was wrong, and she had no way to explain it without making herself the villain. I didn't say anything. I just let the silence stretch, let her feel the weight of what she had done. Lucas tugged at my sleeve again. "Dad, can we go get ice cream?" Perfect timing. "Yeah, bud," I said, ruffling his hair. "Go grab your shoes." Emma was still upstairs. She hadn't come down since saying she didn't want to talk to her mother. Claire swallowed hard, forcing a shaky smile. "Emma, sweetie? Want to come get ice cream with us?" No answer. Claire took a step toward the stairs, but I blocked her path. She looked up at me, her eyes pleading. "Ethan, please. Let me talk to her." I kept my voice low. "Now you want to be a mom?" Her face twisted. "That's not fair." I scoffed. "Fair? Fair would have been you staying faithful. Fair would have been you thinking about how this would affect them instead of sneaking off to sleep with your boss." She flinched. Lucas came back, hopping on one foot as he tried to put his shoe on. "Is Emma coming?" I looked toward the stairs. Emma, last chance. Ice cream. A few seconds passed. Then her door opened, and she walked down slowly, avoiding Claire's gaze. "I want to go with Dad." That was it. No hesitation, no question about whether Claire was coming. Just Dad. Claire's face crumbled. She reached out, but Emma moved past her without a second glance. I grabbed my keys. "We'll be back later." Claire looked at me, desperate. "Ethan, please. We need to talk." I gave her a cold smile. "Yeah, we do. But not now. Enjoy your free time." Then I walked out the door with our kids, leaving her standing there alone. The drive. The second we pulled out of the driveway, Emma spoke up. "Where was she, Dad?" I gripped the steering wheel. "What do you mean?" She crossed her arms. "She wasn't at work." Lucas looked between us, confused. "Maybe she was with her friend?" Emma shook her head. "Mom doesn't have friends." I almost laughed at that. Emma was always sharp, always noticing things Claire thought she was hiding. I exhaled slowly. "I don't know, sweetheart. But I promise you, I'll always be honest with you." Emma stared at me for a long moment, then nodded. "Okay." Lucas piped up. "Can I get chocolate and vanilla swirl?" "Yeah, buddy," I said, forcing a smile. "You can get whatever you want." For the next hour, I focused on them. Laughing, joking, making sure they felt safe. Meanwhile, Claire was probably back home spiraling, knowing she had lost something far bigger than just me. She was losing them. And I wasn't done yet. After ice cream, we went to the park. Emma and Lucas needed to breathe, to feel normal. And honestly, so did I. I sat on the bench, watching them play, while my phone buzzed non-stop in my pocket. Claire. I didn't answer. Let her sweat. After about 2 hours, I finally decided to head home. The entire drive back, Claire's name kept lighting up my screen. Emma noticed. "She's freaking out, huh?" she muttered. I glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "Why do you say that?" Emma shrugged. "Because she knows she messed up." Smart kid. When we pulled into the driveway, Claire was already outside. She must have been waiting at the window, desperate. She ran to the car the second I parked, her expression wild. "Ethan, we need to talk. Now." I got out, keeping my voice calm. "We will. But first, the kids need to get inside." Claire turned to them, putting on her best mom voice. "Hey babies. Did you have fun?" Emma didn't even look at her. Lucas gave a small nod but quickly hurried past her into the house. Claire's smile faltered. I walked toward the door, and she grabbed my arm. "Ethan." I pulled away. Inside. We stepped into the living room. Claire looked nervous, like she already knew whatever she was about to say wouldn't be enough. She took a deep breath. "Okay, I know what this looks like, but..." I cut her off. "No. You don't get to spin this. I know. About Nathan. About the hotels. About every single lie you've told." Her mouth opened and closed, like she was scrambling for a defense. Then suddenly, she changed tactics. Ethan, her voice cracked. And just like that, the tears started. I almost laughed. The performance. The same woman who had no problem lying to my face for months was suddenly a crying mess the second she got caught. She reached for my hands, but I stepped back. Save it. She sniffled. It wasn't supposed to be like this. I crossed my arms. Oh? How was it supposed to be, Claire? She bit her lip, then whispered, I never meant to hurt you. I scoffed. You just meant to cheat on me. Over and over again. She flinched. It wasn't like that. Really? So explain it to me, Claire. Because from where I'm standing, you threw our entire marriage away for your boss. She wiped her eyes, taking a deep breath like she was about to drop some grand explanation that would magically make me understand. I felt trapped, Ethan. I stared at her. Trapped. She nodded, stepping closer. You're a good man, but our life was predictable. I needed excitement. I needed to feel alive. I let out a cold laugh. So you needed excitement? And instead of, I don't know, talking to me, you ran to Nathan. She swallowed hard. He made me feel special. Something inside me twisted. Not because I cared anymore, but because of how casually she said it. Like my love, my sacrifices, my loyalty, it had all meant nothing to her. I nodded slowly. Well, I hope it was worth it. Her face crumbled. Ethan, please, we can fix this. I shook my head. No, you can't fix this. She reached for me again. I'll end things with him. Right now. I'll show you. Just, please don't give up on us. I looked at her, the woman I had spent over a decade building a life with, and felt nothing. I already did, I said. Her breath hitched. Ethan, don't say that. I stepped past her. I'm filing for divorce. She gasped. No. We can go to therapy. We can. I turned to her. The kids already know, Claire. Maybe not all the details, but Emma? She's not stupid. She saw through you before I even told her. Her whole body sagged. No, she can't. She doesn't want to talk to you, I cut in. Lucas barely looked at you when we got home. That's on you. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I can fix this. No, Claire. I stared her down, my voice steady. You broke it. She sobbed, covering her face. For a moment, I just stood there, watching her fall apart. And you know what? It felt good. But I wasn't done. Nathan, the man who ruined my marriage, was next. Claire was still crying when I walked away. I didn't comfort her. I didn't say anything else. I just left her there, standing in the ruins of the life she destroyed. But I wasn't done yet. Nathan had taken something from me. He thought he could take my wife, my family, my peace. Now, I was going to take something from him. I had already gathered plenty of dirt on Claire, but Nathan? He was about to find out what happens when you mess with the wrong man. First, I did some digging. Nathan wasn't just some hotshot executive. He was a fraud. And I wasn't the only one who knew it. Over the past few weeks, I had been quietly looking into him, talking to some people at Claire's company, even hiring a private investigator. Turns out, Nathan had a habit of shuffling money where it didn't belong. His expense reports were a mess. His personal accounts? Lined with cash that didn't match his salary. It was all just there. Like he thought no one would ever bother to look. Idiot. I took everything I had and sent it anonymously to his company's board. Every shady transaction, every off-the-books payment, every red flag that screamed embezzlement. And then I waited. It didn't take long. Nathan's fall. 3 days later, Claire came home looking like she had seen a ghost. I was making dinner for the kids when she walked in. She hesitated in the doorway, like she wasn't sure she belonged there anymore. I kept chopping vegetables. Something wrong. She swallowed. Nathan got fired today. I smirked. There it is. She stepped closer. They accused him of financial misconduct. They're investigating him. I nodded. Huh. That's crazy. Her eyes narrowed. You had something to do with this. I finally looked at her, meeting her gaze with an icy calm. So what if I did? Her lips parted like she wanted to argue, but nothing came out. For the first time, she looked scared of me. Good. I went back to chopping vegetables. Shouldn't you be checking on your special friend? I bet he's having a rough day. She flinched. Ethan, I cut her off. Save it. Claire stood there for a moment, like she didn't know what to do. Then finally she just walked away. I didn't follow. She had made her choice. And now? She was watching it all fall apart. That night, Claire barely spoke. She sat across from me at the dinner table, pushing food around on her plate while the kids talked about their day. She looked hollow, like she wasn't really there. Like she was still trying to process what had happened. I didn't care. She had destroyed our family for excitement. Now, she was watching that so-called excitement turn to dust in her hands. The next morning, she was up earlier than usual, dressed in a plain sweater and jeans, nothing like the confident, polished woman she had been just days ago. She hesitated by the door before finally speaking. "I'm going to work," she said quietly. I sipped my coffee. "You sure? Thought you might need the day off, since your boss is gone." She flinched like I had slapped her. But I wasn't done. "You might want to start looking for a new job," I added, leaning back in my chair. "With the way things are going, your company's about to be a mess. Or do you think they'll keep you around once they find out what you were really doing on all those business trips?" Her hands curled into fists at her sides. "You wouldn't." I raised an eyebrow. "Wouldn't I?" Claire looked like she wanted to scream, but she just turned and walked out the door. She knew I wasn't bluffing. And I wasn't. I had already spoken to my lawyer. The divorce papers were being prepared, and I was going for full custody. Claire could fight it, but with everything I had on her, *** proof of the affair, the neglect, the deception, ***, she didn't stand a chance. A week later, she finally broke. It was late. The kids were asleep. I was sitting on the couch, flipping through channels, when she walked in, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. She sat down across from me, her voice barely above a whisper. "Are you really going to take them from me?" I didn't answer right away. I just let her sit in the silence, let her feel what I had felt for months, helplessness. Then I looked her in the eye. "I'm giving them what they deserve. Stability. Honesty. A parent who actually puts them first." Tears welled in her eyes. "I love them." I scoffed. "Not enough." She broke down then, sobbing into her hands. And for the first time since this started, I felt nothing. No sympathy. No sadness. No anger. Just relief. She was finally feeling even a fraction of what she had put me through. I stood up, grabbed the divorce papers from the kitchen counter, and dropped them in front of her. "Sign them. The sooner you do, the sooner we can all move on." She stared at the papers, her hands shaking. But she didn't argue. She knew she had already lost. And I wasn't wasting another second on her. Claire didn't sign the papers that night. She just sat there, staring at them, like she thought she could make it all disappear if she waited long enough. I didn't push her. I just went upstairs, leaving her alone with the mess she had created. The next morning, she was still there. I found her curled up on the couch, hugging her knees, the divorce papers on the coffee table untouched. "Rough night?" I asked, pouring myself a cup of coffee. She didn't answer right away. Then in a hoarse voice she asked, "Ethan, do you really hate me?" I took a sip, looking at her over the rim of my mug. "Hate you?" I repeated. "No. But I don't love you either. Not anymore." Her eyes filled with tears, and for a moment, I almost saw the Claire I used to know, the one I had built a life with, the one who used to look at me like I was her whole world. But that version of Claire was gone. She had killed that woman the moment she decided I wasn't enough. She trailed off, then took a shaky breath. "I don't know how we got here." I laughed, cold and sharp. We didn't get here, Claire. You did. You made the choices. You lied. You snuck around. And now you want to act like this just happened." She squeezed her eyes shut, shaking her head. "It wasn't supposed to go this far." I slammed my mug down on the counter. "Well, it did." She flinched but didn't argue. Maybe she finally understood that there was no fixing this. I leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "You going to sign those papers, or do you really want to drag this out?" Her jaw tightened. "And what? Lose everything?" I shrugged. "You already did." She swallowed hard, blinking back more tears. "You're really going for full custody?" I nodded. "Yeah. And I'm going to win." Her shoulders sagged, and for the first time since she got caught, I saw it, the fear. Claire had always been so sure of herself, so certain that she could do whatever she wanted and still land on her feet. Not this time. She wiped her face, trying to pull herself together. "And what about us?" I exhaled through my nose, shaking my head. "There is no us, Claire. You made sure of that." Her lips parted like she wanted to argue, but she must have seen it in my eyes. There was nothing left to fight for. No apology, no excuse, no amount of regret could undo what she had done. She reached for the papers with shaking hands, flipping through them slowly. Then, after a long moment, she picked up the pen. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just watched her sign away the last shred of control she had over my life. And for the first time in months, I felt free. Claire signed the papers, but she didn't hand them to me right away. She just sat there, holding them in her lap, staring down like they were some kind of death sentence. "Is there anything I can say to change your mind?" she asked quietly. I didn't even have to think about it. "No." She swallowed hard, nodding slowly. I figured. There was a time when hearing her sound this broken would have gutted me. When I would have dropped everything to comfort her, to hold her, to tell her we could fix it. But that time had passed. I reached for the papers. "I'll take those now." She hesitated, just for a second, then handed them over. Her fingers lingered on the edges, like she still couldn't believe this was happening. When I took them from her, she let out a slow breath. "So what happens now?" I folded the papers neatly, setting them on the counter. "Now? You find a new place to live. You pack your things. And you figure out what your life looks like without me in it." She flinched like the words physically hurt. "And the kids?" I exhaled. "They're staying with me. You'll get to see them, but I'm making sure they have stability. They need that after everything you've put them through." Her face crumpled. "I didn't want to hurt them." I scoffed. "Yeah? Well, you did. And now you get to live with that." She let out a shaky breath, wiping at her face like she was trying to keep from falling apart. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do." I shrugged. "Not my problem." For the first time, I saw something shift in her expression, like she finally understood. Like she was finally realizing that she wasn't Claire, the powerful woman who could have it all. She was just Claire, the woman who lost everything because she thought she deserved more. She stood up slowly, gripping the back of the couch for balance. "I should start packing." I nodded. "Yeah, you should." She walked out of the room, her steps slow and heavy. And just like that, she was out of my life. Claire spent the next few days packing in silence. No pleading, no last-minute attempts to convince me to change my mind, just quiet acceptance. Maybe it finally sank in that there was no fixing this. That she had destroyed everything. The kids barely spoke to her. Emma stayed in her room most of the time, only coming out when she knew Claire was gone. Lucas was quieter than usual, but when Claire tried to hug him, he pulled away. That hurt her. I could see it in her face. But she had no one to blame but herself. I didn't stop her from seeing them. I wasn't going to use my kids as pawns. But I also wasn't going to force them to pretend everything was okay. Claire had to earn back whatever relationship she could salvage with them. The night before she was supposed to leave, she stood in the doorway of our bedroom, my bedroom now. She looked around, her eyes filled with something close to nostalgia. "I don't know who I am without this," she admitted. I didn't answer. It wasn't my problem anymore. She sighed. "Do you think someday you could forgive me?" I met her eyes, and for the first time, I saw true regret. Not just for getting caught. Not just for losing control. Real, crushing regret. But it didn't matter. "Maybe," I said. "But it won't change anything." She nodded slowly, biting her lip. Then she turned and walked away. The next morning, she packed the last of her things into her car. The kids stood on the porch with me, watching as she hesitated by the driver's side door. "I love you both so much," she said, looking at them. "I'll see you soon, okay?" Lucas gave a small nod. Emma didn't say a word. Claire's eyes flicked to me one last time. "Goodbye, Ethan." I didn't respond. She got in her car and drove away. And just like that, she was gone. I looked down at my kids. Lucas squeezed my hand. Emma finally exhaled, like she had been holding her breath for weeks. Then she looked up at me and said, "So what's next?" I smiled. Something better. The first few days after Claire left felt quiet. Not the kind of quiet that comes with loneliness, but the kind that feels like peace. Like a storm had finally passed. Emma seemed lighter. She smiled more, laughed more, like a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. Lucas still had his moments. He missed his mom, and I wasn't about to tell him he shouldn't, but he clung to me more, like he finally felt safe. We were okay. Better than okay. And then, there was Olivia. She had been there through all of it, listening, supporting, never pushing. Just being there. And as much as I had been focused on everything falling apart, I had started to realize something. I wanted her in my life. One evening, a few weeks after Claire left, Olivia invited us over for dinner. The kids were thrilled. Emma and Sophia had been inseparable lately, and Lucas adored Olivia's daughter. After the kids ran off to play, Olivia and I found ourselves alone in the kitchen. She was stirring a pot of pasta, humming softly, completely at ease. She caught me watching her and smirked. "What?" I leaned against the counter. "Nothing. Just. I think this is the most relaxed I've felt in years." Her expression softened. "That's a good thing, right?" I nodded. "Yeah. A really good thing." For a moment, we just stood there, the warmth of the kitchen wrapping around us. Then, without really thinking, I reached for her hand. She stilled, her eyes searching mine. "You sure you're ready for this?" she asked quietly. I didn't even hesitate. "Yeah," I said. "I'm ready." She smiled then, really smiled. And when I kissed her, it didn't feel like a mistake. It didn't feel like a distraction. It felt like something real. Something better. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't looking back. Claire was gone. The life I thought I had was over. But instead of feeling lost, I felt free. The kids were happy. I was happy. And Olivia, she was becoming more than just someone who understood my pain. She was becoming someone I wanted beside me. One evening, as we sat on my porch watching the kids play, she slipped her hand into mine. "No regrets?" she asked. I squeezed her hand. Not a single one. Claire had made her choices. And I had made mine. And this? This was exactly where I was meant to be.